inconceivable. What was considered completely futuristic has become a normal way of life today. Several examples, so what appears futuristic today, whether it is in urban transport or any other infrastructure, can actually become a reality in a very short span of time. So, if smart technology could make a mobile phone, a simple mobile phone, into such a powerful instrument, where every device, every entity in the city can be connected, can serve as a sensor to find out various issues, whether it's pollution levels or traffic levels or weather systems or anything, and they can interact and provide with intelligent solutions almost on an online basis. But of course, a lot of investments will be needed in infrastructure. But I think the benefits of these investments, they far outweigh the costs, and therefore there is no looking back. We all have to work together on providing the resilient, futuristic, inclusive infrastructure that we all require. Thank you very much.
Thank you for putting that thing forward. Before I ask Dr. Hariharan to offer the vote of thanks, in the spirit of what Mr. Jain spoke about, a collaborative approach with no single stakeholder, if there are any interventions, not questions, we're not taking questions, but if there are any interventions that anyone in the audience wants to make, I'll take 5 interventions of 1 minute each, in case people wish to intervene. If not, obviously we'll move to the vote of thanks. No? In which case, yes? Please.
Partha was just wondering, digital infrastructure, does it also need pedestrianization of the urban spaces, or as a pretty much strong accompaniment of that process of moving towards a digital environment? Because it actually might have much more than just an optical impact.
Digital and urban, any further interventions? So I'm almost feeling like a bidding auctioneer now, so in which case I will then ask Dr. Hariharan to close this wonderful conference moving forward.
Namaste and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you to CIA for having me here. Mr. Mahendra Jain was modest when he said there are 3 doctors sitting here. What he didn't tell you is that there are very few people who can write in their CVs or their bios that they also speak Sanskrit. He's an IIM Ahmedabad and has been in urban development for as many years as I know him. I've had the privilege of meeting him twice, thrice. I still have a few things to negotiate with him for green buildings and such in India, as well as in Bangalore and Karnataka. Dr. Partha Mukhopadhyay, I had the time and the leisure to read that concept document of yours. I have to go back to it, maybe revisit it many times, because there are several sentences in what he's written, and I urge you all to read that again. That the framework that he's setting there is something that is pregnant with a great deal of implications for what India has to do between now and maybe 2022 or so. It's like if I were to, ask you to, if you are earning, let's say, 30 lakhs, and I ask you to spend, let's say, 14 lakhs today, you have to borrow monies. India is set to spend something like $1 trillion. It's about 40% of its annual GDP. The pace at which it has to spend and the manage, monitor challenges that it will have is not something that the country has ever seen. And we know the abilities or the lack of them when it comes to management. We have pretty strong an administration in this country, and that bulwark of the 1960s is held on. So, well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege to be here, of course. And like Sabyasachi said, and he's from RICS. K.T. Ravindran is one of those people that I have known from the times he was in SPNA. And I know the quantum of work that RICS has been doing, and the thing is that when you sit in a conference like this between RIS and CIA, deliberating on futuristic, resilient digital infrastructure, you can tell yourself that this state, has to gain as much as, I would say, the rest in the south of India first, because I have some fair knowledge of what is happening in TN and in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, as well as, of course, Kerala. I'm told that the discussions of the last few sessions, yesterday, for instance, I wasn't here, have been pretty intense and rich on content. My hope is that our focus on such futuristic and innovative technology ideas will boost the standard of such infrastructure projects, as I said earlier. The outcomes, and of course the outputs that will come off these things as we adopt to it, as Mr. Mahendra Jain also said, is something that we all as leaders have to watch out for. We have to be vigilant on that one. And I know a lot of you here represent quantums of monies that you will be responsible for spending. And that is one reason why you have to be terribly conscious of how you are going to do this. With investments being the central point of discussion yesterday and today, India needs massive investments in telecom over the 2030s and the 2040s. Electric vehicles, you know, and the tremendous change in the landscape itself that we will face tells us all that this is going to be a moment, well, for the human species itself, I will say. By 2025, we're going to have 30% of our fueling stations disappearing from our cities. By 2030, if our plans work right, 50% of our fueling stations of the fossil variety kind is going to go away. David Mackey writes in one of his dedications in that wonderful book that he wrote on sustainability, which you can download free, he urges you not to buy it. He says that that book is dedicated to people who are the last of the generation of people who are going to be fossil dependent. So digital connectivity has vast growth impacts, as we know, because it facilitates communication and commerce, but it also propels economic growth. Case in point is individuals can't transfer payments digitally, we know this. Use of e-governance portals to connect with the government, access information on online purchases, for instance, without continuous and reliable access to the internet. Just now, we had Sabyasachi talk about the difference between bandwidth and online or wireless communication. Digital technologies are changing the way infrastructure is provided, operated, or charged for, and maintained across sectors. So the landscape for businessmen or for industry itself and the investments that they bring in also is going to be challenged on the sort of uncertainties that they have to grapple with. In rail, highways, energy, water, telecom, these technologies permit infrastructure services to be delivered more efficiently and at less as cost, using less resources. That's very important. In fact, if you go back to Dr. Partha's concept framework, he's again and again insisting upon how water and sanitation, clean and renewable energy and such have to be looked at as we also grapple with GDP and growth of this kind, with infrastructure being focused. Causing less damage to environment and reaching a wider user base is one of those significant challenges before us. This requires coordination across sectors that have hitherto operated in isolation. And we know this business of silos and approaches that we need to be taking at good governance levels, but I'd rather leave that there for now. The adaptation of these technologies is not without risk. Financial risk driven by the fast obsolescent nature of such technologies, where yesterday's cutting edge in technology is tomorrow's discard. Now, the challenge here is that if I'm going to be financing any of these projects at the large levels that I have to, it's a predicament that is going to leave any such financing mechanism or financing partner or company really in deep distress on how he's going to recover those monies over the next, say, 7 to 10 years of such investment. So implementation of new technologies may need public action in terms of financing models as well as regulatory oversight. We are hopeful that the challenge of designing projects in a manner that balances the risk and the reward in a way that providers are incentivized to serve users, well, will leave such financiers insured in terms of realization of those risks into the future. These are visions of good men. They have to be realized and can't be realized without industry leaders. Many of you who were here yesterday and those here today work on that with the sort of focus and the capacity, competence, and expertise that you all possess. In conclusion, I'll only say this, that there comes a time in the destiny of a nation, and I think India is today at that point where you are the cynosure of the world's eye. China was at some point in time in the 90s. Well, you know, England held that space for many decades in the late 19th century, the US, then Germany, Japan, and so on. That is something that India has to see if it can seize and work upon well. We need about 1 million jobs over 300 months. That's not happening just now if we don't have many of these infrastructure connects actually taking you back into opportunities of that kind. By 2030, one report says, some 2 or 3 months ago, India will have about 60 million jobs at an average of about 35,000 rupees, not inflation adjusted. Now, that's not a scenario that you and I want to be actually countenancing if you are actually leaders of business, sitting here to try and see how you can digitally take India to grapple with GDP, resource utilization, as well as, shall we say, financial viability. I also take the opportunity to extend an invite to you all to join us at the upcoming 3rd AIIB annual meeting scheduled June 2018 in Bombay. As tradition, CII will be organizing this in close collaboration with the Government of India and its functionaries, including RIS. There are many host country sessions focused on attracting investments from such member countries of the AIIB, which I'm sure all my colleagues in the industry will want to look out for. I hope the deliberations over the last 2 days have been fruitful and indicative of highly and massively positive investment flows into India into the near future. I'd like to call this conference to a close with these few words. Thanks so much.